Hey, welcome back to episode 26. I thought it was 26, but I psyched myself out. Of the Cellarcast. Let's see. I just had some Bacos, so I might be kind of like moving that around in my mouth. It's one of those foods that just kind of gets like stuck around your mouth. What else was I gonna say? I don't remember what I was gonna say. If I was gonna mention anything. I'm a little tired right now, sort of. It's like 5 a.m. and I've been awake since like 5 p.m. last night. Damn. Okay, didn't even think about that. Anyway, I want to start out with a comment review from last time. We technically only really had one comment, and it comes from a new commenter. De La Soulful 1. De La Soulful 1. They say, hey, hello. Can one of us join the Cellarcast? It could be fun, even if it's short. So I'm assuming that this is referring to, I think last time I said something about how I really liked having a guest on, and I would want to do it in the future. So I'm assuming that what this is asking is, will I bring viewers as guests onto this podcast? And the answer is no. And it's not because I hate people or whatever. Mainly, I would like to keep a, what would you call it? Like a healthy boundary between me and my audience. So I'm very comfortable, like, talking to you guys in the comments and answering questions, answering your questions on the podcast, but like literally bringing someone on who's just like a random viewer is too well. It opens up that if I do it for one person, I have to do it for everyone, or now there's like, it just invites a lot of like weird pressure stuff. It's one of those like, I don't want to start playing favoritism or something. I would rather just not do it at all. And that doesn't mean I don't like anyone who watches the podcast or anything like that. I think it's really nice that a lot of people enjoy listening to me ramble for like 2 hours at a time. It's just that I would like to keep it professional. I don't know if that's the right term. I'd like to keep it a healthy boundary is what I think. I was thinking about the idea of like a parasocial relationship, right? So if you weren't aware, a parasocial relationship is basically a one-way relationship that you have with someone that you've never really met. You haven't actually met. So people, it's much more common. It's always existed. There's always been people that other people have looked up to that they've never met. I mean, like actors or musicians, any kind of public person. You probably have some form of parasocial relationship to like the leader of your country or something. But with the internet age, it's gotten a lot more, I should say, in the influencer age, yuck, it's gotten a lot more prevalent or common or intense, because there's always kind of like more of a separation when you're only seeing someone on the TV or only in movies or in a scarce interview or something like that. But when you have something like someone who does a daily vlog of their life, or someone who does a weekly podcast where they just kind of talk unscripted for like 2 hours and share things about their life and their opinions and all that and their thoughts, you can start to feel like you know that person, and to an extent you do. But the thing about parasocial relationships is that it is like a one-way thing. So if you watch this podcast regularly, you might have some kind of an idea of like who I am, and I try to present myself in a genuine way, I guess. I'm never trying to put on an act necessarily. So in some sense, yeah, you do sort of know who I am, but there's a lot of stuff that you guys don't know about a lot of things. I'm not even talking about like deep dark secrets or anything like that. There's just a lot of stuff you guys that people don't know as just a natural thing. You know, I can't share. You can't understand every aspect of me. So I'm sure from like a viewer's perspective, and this is not meant to be disparaging to, De La Soulful, who left the comment, but like to a lot of people listening to the podcast, it might make a lot of sense to like have like bring a viewer on, and you know there's some shows that'll do like, oh, have a caller call in, a viewer call in or something like that for like a brief thing. That's kind of that style. This is more of a I guess this is a more intimate podcast. Like, you know, even when I had like my girlfriend on or when I had Max on, it was like very conversational, and that's kind of how I like it to be. Whereas opposed to when you do a call in, it's like, hey, there's a different tone to it. It's like, hey, we're bringing on someone from the audience, you know. It's a different tone. I hope that you kind of understand. It's hard for me to find the exact words. I guess it's a little more of a production is what it feels like. And it also, this is something that like so yeah, like it wouldn't fit the tone, I guess, of how I like this podcast to be. But also I just think that, like, if I'm being honest, it would probably be really awkward. And I don't mean that because of like anyone in particular listening is maybe like super awkward or socially inept or anything like that. But like, you know a lot more about me than I know about you. I have a few friends who listen to this who I might, you know, if they came on, it would be different compared to a random viewer who I only know via like username or something like that. So it would probably be really strange and awkward. Pardon me. Yeah, so hope that's not too disappointing. All right, I hope anyone can understand who was maybe hopeful about a viewer thing. I don't know, maybe I could do a viewer special. Probably not, in all honesty. Not right now. Not as things currently are. But yeah, no hard feelings. It's just I try to do that. Like someone came up. Someone I should say come up to me. Someone emailed me and asked me. They were really nice. They asked if I would be okay with like having a Discord. Or if I had a Discord, and if I didn't, was I interested in making one, you know, for about my channel. And I always think I handled it pretty politely, but I basically said like no, because that's way too much accountability for me. Way too much accountability, because anything that happens there, I am also liable for, even if I'm not present, which I probably wouldn't be, in all honesty. And also, part of it is like, I think that I want to control what my presence is on the internet. I don't have a problem presenting myself in the least flattering way possible. I made a joke about in that Night of the Living Dead MMOs, that video. I literally made a joke about me being a pedophile because I like Toho. Like, I don't have a problem. And a neckbeard, I guess, because it was about how, what was it? It was about how Warhammer is like Toho for neckbeards instead of pedophiles. That was the joke. And then it cuts to me holding one of my Toho figures. And the joke is that I like both of them. I don't have any problem presenting myself in an unflattering way like that. or making fun of myself or anything like that. The only thing that I would like is that I am the one who is in control of that presentation. Like I don't mind word spreading around me. This is something that had happened in high school. I don't mind word spreading around me, round about me, I should say. I don't mind word spreading around about me as long as it's like true. And I think for the most part it was. I don't know, there was this weird phenomenon in high school where like I never hung out with anyone. I never hung out with anyone outside of school. I would go home and I would sleep. And I would wake up and I would do homework, and then I would go back to sleep, and then I'd wake up and go back to school. And that was my schedule every day. For 4 years, I never hung out with people. But somehow I would run into people at maybe like school or events where like sports games or something. And I would run into people from other schools, and they'd be like, "Are you Taigen?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Whoa, cool, nice to meet you." And I was like, who are you? And they're like, "Oh, I go to such and such school." And I'm like, I don't even know where that is. It was really weird. It happened like pretty regularly. It was very odd. I was like, I guess people just talk about me. It seems flattering. It seems like it's nice. Okay. So like, what the heck was I even talking about? Right. So I'd like to control what I put out about myself, or what my presence is online. And at the moment, I'm only really comfortable with that being, the videos that I put out, what I say here, what I say in comments, the community posts, interacting with people there. That's about the boundary that I'm comfortable with. And I think that suddenly opening up that presence to now also be controlled by whoever decides to like click a link to join a Discord server, I'm not going to deal with that. That is way too stressful. However, and this is what I told that person who emailed me, if anyone wants to make like a Discord or a subreddit or whatever about my channel or my content, I've got no problem with that, as long as it's unofficial, and I will not endorse it. I will not not even like link to it. And I might pop on there every now and again to ask or to answer questions or say hi or something like that, but let it be known, I do not want anything like a mod status. I don't want any kind of position of authority or ownership or accountability, because I don't want to deal with it in the first place. But if you'd like to do it and just have an unofficial way to discuss my content, and I'm very, very, it makes me really happy that I'm able to create stuff that people do respond to enough that they want to like talk about it with other people. And that's very like nice to me. That's very flattering. Because I grew up, basically I was raised on YouTube, and I would always want to talk about the creators that I loved with other people, and no one ever knew what the heck I was talking about. So people being able to get that experiences for talking about me is very neat. Gratifying, I guess, is the word. I hope that answers your question. Want to move on. This is a bit of a heavy story. Ian Hetherington passed away on, what is the story was a few days ago. In the article, I cannot find the exact date that he died. Maybe I can find another one. Ian Hetherington death. December 14th, 2021. He was 69. Jesus. So if anyone doesn't know who Ian Hetherington is, I would recommend that you actually go watch my video. It's called like Bandersnatch, and you thought Cyberpunk 2077 was bad? Bit of a mouthful of a title, but I thought that putting Cyberpunk in the title would be good for views, and it's also an interesting correlation between that game and Cyberpunk. So it's not entirely clickbait. I am actually really proud of that video, Bandersnatch. Just look up Bandersnatch on my channel. Ian Hetherington was a businessman who founded... He did not... he did not found Imagine. He did found it. It's been a minute since I've refreshed myself on the story. So back in the 80s, there was a software house called Imagine in the UK, and they were one of the biggest game developers in the UK. This is during the time of the American console market crash, so in the early 80s. And Imagine had a couple hits of the in their day. I'm trying to remember exactly. Again, I'm super foggy on it. I probably should have refreshed my memory. Basically, Ian Hetherington was one of the founders, and Imagine was just a total madhouse. It was a developer that was it was in this industry that was like in its infancy of infancies, right? And suddenly it's this almost Wolf of Wall Street confluence of like super young industry. No one knows what's going on. There's teenagers who are making their own games on computers and selling them and becoming millionaires and like being able to retire in their 20s from how much money they make off of these games. And it's this totally new world, and in the midst of it, this company gets founded by a bunch of 20-year-old dudes who have no knowledge of business. Pardon me. And it goes about as well as you would expect. It was a giant disaster, and my video goes into more depth on that. Amazingly, the whole disaster part was actually filmed on camera. By an amazing coincidence, there was like a BBC special about like holiday shopping, or no, it was called like Channel. I forget what it was called. Commercial breaks, something like that. And it was basically about young entrepreneurs, and they said, "Whoa, here's this crazy new industry, computer games. Let's go find follow two of the top software houses in the UK. Isn't that crazy? This kid, he made like £30 million from one game. Now he works at this company. Imagine, let's go check it out." And they just so happened to be there while the company was just completely imploding, and it was all captured on camera, and it's kind of amazing. I'm really proud of that video. It's one of those videos that I felt no need to even... I don't think there's a single joke in that video, because there was just no need. The story itself was so crazy. It was so amusing on its own. I would really, go check out that video. And apparently, so this games industry article says he died after a short illness. So I should mention also, before I talk about his death, I should say that after Imagine died, he went on to found Psygnosis. And Psygnosis is the company that became one of the most prolific software houses in the UK. They made Lemmings for one. Psygnosis made a ton of stuff. They made the all those Dracula games. So if I just look up Psygnosis games, I can do like a good refresher. So Lemmings, Wipeout, Destruction Derby. Let's see, Discworld. Huh. Wow. Shadow of the Beast, Microcosm. Let's see, Bradicus. I totally forgot. I have a Bradicus poster in my room. I got it custom printed. Bradicus was basically so the topic of the video is basically what was going to be their magnum opus game, Bandersnatch, and it totally failed. Never got released, but then a version of it, or a lot of the ideas, then got taken and remade into this game called Bradicus, which was like their first game as Psygnosis. And I found a picture while I was researching for that video, of a really cool art piece from like the cover, just like a black and white art piece of the main character like kneeling, and I just thought it was super dope, and I got it custom printed on a poster, and it's hanging above my computer behind it. That's most of the notable games that they had. So yeah, Psygnosis is kind of a big deal. He stayed at the company until 1998, when he left to form Evolution Studios, which made WRC and MotorStorm, which are some racing games. The news follows the death of fellow Psygnosis and Imagine. How did I miss? Oh, David Lawson also died earlier this year. Yeah. Yeah. So just really not much besides like pour it out for a real one, you know. Definitely like an industry. Do I want to say changer? A very noteworthy industry contributor. What a lot of people don't realize, there was actually, if you follow Leon Massey, he made a video about, it's called Games After the Crash. It's his like most recent video. And there is a lot, especially in like America, there's this sort of like, I'll say over dramatization of the crash of like 83. Really, the video game crash is more aptly described as the American console market crash. Arcades were still doing fine. They actually crashed later, but for different reasons. But arcades were there. In other countries, I mean, in Japan, the Famicom released 1983. All right. What else? The UK is a great example. The UK, honestly, even like if you look at the PC side of gaming, totally different story. Like basically unaffected by the crash. Just a different market by itself. Might also be one of the reasons that even today PC is seen as a different arena from consoles. But the let's see, what the heck am I talking about? Right. So like the UK actually has a very prolific history with computer games, like PC gaming. I mean, for reference, 1983. Hang on. I want to make sure I'm not getting this wrong. 85. So, you know, the year before the NES, people like to drum up this really dramatic story about how the NES brought back gaming. 1985, year before the NES released in North America, a little game came out called Ultima 4? Quest of the Avatar? That is not a that is not a dead medium. Not by a long shot. If you can have a game like Ultima 4 come out, gaming is alive and well. It's just on the PC, and it's coming from countries that are not America. Honestly, there's even a bunch of American games that came out in the 80s, in the early 80s when the crash happened. It was basically just I think Massey says in his video, it wasn't as much a crash. It was a crash, but it was more so like the American market lost interest because of just bad business practices, bad consumer practices. Yeah, so quick little history lesson. I want to talk about, quick little note, we're going to have a little fighting game tangent on this episode. I want to talk about BlazBlue Central Fiction. I'm sorry, BB fans. I kind of just bounced off of it. I ended up switching off of Azrael. Just because I wasn't quite feeling it. And I kind of gravitated towards Relius, who was ironically one of the few designs that I really liked. I don't even want... Okay, hang on. I was thinking about this more, because... Lozy, you fucker. You left a long-ass comment about the designs in BlazBlue. And, yeah, honestly, I think most of it just comes down to personal preference. I understand that a lot of the designs are, like... The characters are wearing some kind of uniform with some sort of, modification. That's just not my cup of tea. I'm not a big fan of, like... designs where everyone's wearing the same uniform, unless it's like there's a lot of notable exceptions, or not exceptions. Let's there's like, what I like is when there's a lot of characters who have a uniform that they wear in a very specific way. I really like the character designs in Bleach for that reason, because all the designs of like all the Soul Reapers are super simple but really memorable. Like, you could show a single thing, like their one defining little detail, and you would immediately be able to tell who it is. Like, just if I just say like, oh, a little like string of like red beads across the shoulder, it's like, okay, that's what Ichigo wears. Oh, the pink sash, oh, that's Rangiku. The big, what would you call it? Like, mask, head covering. Oh, that's the dog guy. Komamura? Is that what he... I'm thinking about Bleach recently just because the trailer for the new anime season dropped, which I'm pretty excited for. It's probably going to be the first thing that I've watched in a while. What was I talking about? Right, yeah. So I don't mind that. Just like not a big fan. My problem with the BlazBlue designs was that a lot of the characters who were in uniforms, it felt like the uniforms are like very detailed, but also the details don't tell me much about the character, if that makes sense. And it's kind of funny because I sort of find myself, when I looked at it and I really looked at the roster, I realized that I probably like more designs than I dislike. And it's funny, like when I tally it up, pardon me, there's more designs that I actually quite like. One of them is Relius, and I find it funny because I think I gravitate, for some reason, I just gravitate towards characters who are well dressed. I don't know what the deal is with that, but yeah, a lot of the characters that I end up liking in fighting games end up being like at least somewhat like dressed up compared to others. So I don't know what it is about BlazBlue, but it feels like kind of slow and sort of stiff. I don't know what it is. I don't know if like maybe I almost want to like go in and do more like testing just to find out exactly like what I'm feeling, but it feels like things just happen slower in BlazBlue, or like I move slower, and you might just chalk that up to like me being inexperienced with it. But you know, I've played air dashing fighters. I've played like, I can jump into a lot of games and not really feel that. You know, there's a little bit of like, okay, you got to get used to the way that a game handles. That happens in a lot of genres, but I don't know. It's weird. It felt like I didn't have a ton of like control over my character. There might be like, I don't know, is it like because of stubby normals? I don't think, no, that's not true. Normals aren't really that stubby in BlazBlue. I wouldn't say they're much, I wouldn't say that they're stubbier than like gear at all. Is it movement? Is it like the base movement speed? Maybe it's that I'm just like used to playing really like weird high mobility. It's like a weird high mobility, which is like Slayer. Slayer is very slow, but he's also super mobile, which is a weird. He has tricky movement. He's got schmovement, you know. I don't know what it is, and I like to figure it out. But while I was playing it, I did enjoy Relius. He's like the first puppet character I've ever felt like drawn towards. I think that his design is cool. I think that like all of his combos, they make more sense, I guess, to me, just intuitively from other, or the way that his moveset works makes a lot more sense to me than other puppet characters. Like having a puppet that you like control separately is, it's always been like, too much for my brain. But his is almost like a little automatic. It's not quite automatic, but it does like follow you around, and it's almost like an extension of your special moves, which I think is neat. Yeah, maybe I can like jump back into it. I don't know. Talking about it makes me want to try it out more. One thing I think that also sort of put a damper on my enjoyment of the game is specifically in the beta right now. So the thing is that it's almost got this like Strive problem, like Strive has, which is where in game the rollback is flawless. Like I had some just great connections, just like such a smooth gameplay experience. The team did a great job modding rollback into the game, fixing the online. The problem was getting into games in the first place. So like there's no, I think BlazBlue introduced this lobby format where the idea was you have a little character that kind of walks around in this little room, and everyone in the lobby walks around, and then there's these arcade cabinets set up. There's these arcade cabinets set up, and you and the other person stand at opposite ends of the arcade system. It's based off of like, so in Japan they have these dual-sided arcade machines where, like, you know, in the US we always have, or we're used to outside of Japan, the like you stand next to someone else when you're playing against them. In Japan they have these bigger ones where it's like there's a screen on one end. There's basically, it's you imagine like two arcade cabinets stuck together, facing away from each other. So you play not being able to see the other person because they're on the other side. And so it's that kind of style. So you and the other person go up to each end of like the cabinet, and then you play each other. And from what I understand, that works just fine and good, and you get to do instant rematch and all that. Pretty sure. Not sure if it's instant. But for some reason in the beta, maybe this was a problem with the modding or whatever, and it'll be sorted out in the future, lobbies don't work. As in, like, they are just, the options just grayed out. I sort of mentioned this last time, I think, but the only thing matchmaking that you can do is player rooms. And player rooms are I don't like them. They're just much inferior versions of the regular lobbies. It's basically a room that up to 8 people join, and then you hit A to confirm that you're like ready, and then you enter a matchmaking pool of people in the room, and then you match with them, and then after every game you go back to the room, and then you have to rematch with them, and then they have to confirm it, and then you have to go to character select, and you gotta select your character and your color and your stage. And it's just it's way longer and more cumbersome than it needs to be. And it gets even more frustrating when you play somebody once, they back out of the lobby, and now you're standing there. You are the 7th member in an 8-person lobby. You're waiting for one more person to join, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and no one ever joins, so you back out and you make a lobby on your own, and then you wait for like 5 minutes and no one joins, and you just wait and wait and wait, and then you're like, okay, I guess no, not enough people are here to play with me right now. So I guess I'm not going to a Discord. I am not stooping to the level of going to a Discord to ask for games. That's so annoying. I can't stand that. That's not a real solution. Thinking about it, for my description, it sort of just sounds like another version of the like full lobbies, but trust me, it is much slower. It is so much slower, and very like you can't even. It's so weird because when you get put back into the room after a game, you're always in the top corner, so everyone just kind of ends up piling in the top corner, and it's really just strange. It's like you can't tell who's in the room, you can't tell who's in a active like in a match. And then some people had it like set to be where like only one match can be happening at a time. That was really annoying. Because and then like everyone else would just be spectating. That was obnoxious. Yeah, so just I think that also was just like frustrating. Like maybe I would be able to actually like get into the game and really like get a feel for it and get over like the hump of just that sluggish, stiff feeling that it has right now. But I would need more. I would need to literally play against people, and I don't know. I'll wait until the full lobbies come out. The great thing is that the game's always going to have people online, because now it's got rollback. And hey, so that's where I am right now with Central Fiction. Glad that it's getting its update. Probably going to have a bunch of cool updates in the future, just like TFC did for Plus R. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. Speaking of, I want to talk about DNF Duel. So, if you've never heard of DNF Duel, this is really interesting. This is a really interesting case. I find it. Or else I wouldn't be talking about it. Haha. So DNF Duel is a fighting game that is based off of the game Dungeon Fighter Online. So Dungeon Fighter Online is a, I believe, Korean MMO. It's an MMO beat 'em up, which is already pretty interesting. And apparently, I had no idea about this. Pardon me. It is the 3rd most played game in the world. It makes so much money. I think it's like the biggest game in China next to like League or something. It's bigger than CSGO over there. It's huge. I had no idea about this game. And the reason no one in the West has heard of it, it's huge in Asia. I think it's the biggest game in South Korea, up there with maybe, like, I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but it's one of the biggest games in just all of Asia. And the reason no one in the West has heard of it is basically because of mismanagement. Wow, shocking. And a few other things, I guess. So DFO has a kind of older looking pixel art style. When I say older looking, I mean, like, it kind of reminds me of, when did this game come out? 2005. It's a very, like, just look at the artwork, and it looks like, how do I describe it? It's like high quality pixel art, but like oh geez, it's reminding me of something like mid 2000s high quality pixel art, if that makes any sense at all. Just look it up. Just look up DFO, and you'll see what I mean. Very pixely, very like noticeable pixels, but very clean, highly detailed sprites and all that. So when they brought DFO to the West, from what I understand, from reading some Reddit comments of a guy who was very enthusiastically describing the game, there were some certain things like, yeah, it's very non-traditional. The concept might not have been very exciting to a Western audience, especially in a market being gripped by World of Warcraft at the time, but it also snap. I'm trying to remember exactly what that guy said. It's just marketed poorly. If I go back to like frickin' Redo, just look up. Because there's been a ton of, I'll get to that later. I was going to say it's been a ton of posts, but come on. Okay, so so this one comes from from Moal09. He says, for anyone wondering why this got made into a fighter, DNF is literally one of the biggest games in Asia. It makes more money than Counter-Strike in China and is one of the biggest esports there and in South Korea. It legitimately makes more yearly than WoW does, which is not saying much nowadays. And it's been out since 2004, and it's made like $15 billion total or something. It's possibly the highest growing PC game ever made. This comes from a Super Data analysis. So it never really took off the same way in the West because the game is full of Asian style grind, and you know exactly what that means, and it's not porn, and pay to win mechanics at endgame. And the endgame progression in general is one of the most confusing things ever if you don't have a guide. So the P2P PvP netcode is atrocious outside of Asia, where people aren't within like 10 ms of each other, effectively destroying the esports element. The skill floor/ceiling was also incredibly high, around the level of most old-school anime fighters, which probably would have limited its appeal here as well. So it's very difficult and has bad netcode. Lots of classes had difficult near TOD combos, and if you didn't learn them, you were at a huge disadvantage. So yeah, very punishing. Nexon, which is the publisher, botched the initial Western release horribly, and it never really recovered even when Reupload took over. Well, I guess they're the current publisher. Reupload is the current publisher, and generally did a much better job, although they've been botching it too lately. So they don't say exactly how they botched it, but I believe them. I'm assuming it's going to come down to zero marketing, and I don't know, probably just, yeah, I don't know. Probably someone more familiar with it could explain. If you're familiar with Dungeon Fighter, feel free to explain. I'm very curious. So now, so here's the story. So this game has existed. I've never heard of it. Most people in the West have never heard of it. All of a sudden, MapleStory would be a good comparison for the graphical style, with like Korean 2D MMOs. Anyway, so all of a sudden, like a year ago, this trailer drops for a fighting game based off of Dungeon Fighter Online. It's called DNF Duel. And you're like, why isn't it called DFO Duel? Or DF Duel, right? Like Dungeon Fighter. DFD. Besides the fact that DNF Duel actually kind of rolls off the tongue better. And so apparently the reason for that is because DFO is only... Dungeon Fighter Online is only the name that the game has outside of Korea. And the original title is Dungeon and Fighter, aka Dungeon Fighter. Dungeon and Fighter. Dungeon and Fighter, which is... Oh, someone's waking up. Which is the most... It's such a Korean name, it's painful. It's such a Korean game name, it's... Oh my god. So, I guess they decided for some reason to go with the original title, so they're calling it DNF Duel. It comes out, or the trailer comes out, it's more of a teaser really. Let's find out that it's being published by Arc System Works, and it's developed by Ating, which you might know from developing Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So I don't think that they had a full developmental part, but it was at least Ultimate Marvel 3 was at least partly developed by them. So it's been a good number of years since they have touched a fighting game. And if you look at 8ing's 8ing Games, if you look at their history, they did make Bloody Roar back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Also Fate Unlimited Codes. See, Naruto Clash of Ninja. I didn't know any of this. Bleach Heat the Soul. Shit. Yeah, speaking of Bleach. So they made, they made Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. They made Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Or at least partially. So they do, and Castlevania Judgment? Huh. So they do have experience making fighting games. A lot of them end up being licensed. But some of them, like, I don't know, Heat the Soul is not the greatest series of fighting games. But Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is, from what I understand, pretty cool, actually. And so is Bloody Roar. So, like, they can do it, right? I don't know if the people who made those games are still there, but they can do it. They do have a history of making fighting games. And so it's being published and partly developed from what I'm saying from what I understand a lot. So it's being partly developed by Arc System Works. They at least seem to be lending technical help with it, because the game is using that same I don't know what we can call it. It's that 3D anime, I guess is what you would call it. Look that ArcSys games have mostly been using since Guilty Gear Xrd in 2013. And yeah, it's some of the best looking fighting games ever. Probably the best fighting game style, like just visual in terms of like visual style. Totally gorgeous. DNF Duel is using the same one. It kind of its own spin on it, its own take, a little variation. Like if you put it side by side with Xrd and especially Strive, it does look different. And games like BlazBlue and Dragon Ball FighterZ, they all have a bit of a difference between them. But yeah, so immediately all we know is that the game is using that style and it exists. And then a year goes by and no one hears a thing. There is not a peep about this game. And it got to the point where there was some, streamers or YouTubers who were like, what happened to that dungeon fighter game? Is that happening? Like, what is that? They just dropped a teaser and then nothing else. What's going on with that game? Is it dead? Is it vaporware? And then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks ago, they drop a trailer. They drop a character trailer for like one of the characters in the game, Berserker. And everyone's like, oh shit, character trailer. Okay, so they're starting the marketing. Like 2 days later, next trailer. Oh, another character trailer. Like 3 days later, another trailer. People start going like, whoa, whoa, whoa. When is this game coming out? Like, the marketing, and they just kept this up for the last like 2 weeks. Every 2 or 3 days, another trailer, another trailer, another trailer. And they're only like 40 seconds long. But man, they looked good. The gameplay looked good. The characters look awesome. Like the designs, they're so sick in this game. So cool. Like everyone looks badass. This is the game, I've never seen a fighting game get so many comments along, let's say, some form of, I want to try out every character in this game because they all look so cool. So they just start dropping these trailers. People are like, is this game coming out like next month? Like, what is going on? So they drop like 5 trailers. And everyone's like, okay, cool. And then they drop a 6th trailer. And it's for this, another character, Hitman. He's like a Dilfy assassin. In a suit, so you know that I have to play him. And then at the end of the trailer, it's Hitman's character portrait slides into the center of the frame. And on both sides of him, of his portrait, are 4 more portraits in silhouette. And they're like, yeah, you're getting another 5 characters after the last 5 characters. Everyone's like, oh, shit. So they start dropping more trailers. And then at the very end, they're like, at the last trailer, they're like, yeah, and guess what? There's going to be an open beta. And it's this weekend, which was like 2 days away. And everyone's like, what? And it's the same weekend. It was this past weekend. Same one that King of Fighters 15 had their second beta, open beta. Everyone's like, what? Whoa, what a fucking power move, dude. This game is a masterclass in marketing. Holy shit. This went from a game that it was based on a game that no one in the West knew about. No one knew, no one had ever heard of. It comes, the teaser drops, okay. Everyone just kind of like, okay, whatever, and then faded into the back of your mind for a year of nothing, and then all of a sudden, in the span of like 2.5, maybe 3 weeks, pardon me, we go from nothing to, holy shit, I want to play this game. This game looks sick. And there was a bunch of other announcements that they started dropping around the game. Number 1, it's got rollback. That's also probably another thing that ArcSys was helping with, because there's not a lot of one of the problems or hurdles to implementing rollback into fighting games that Japanese developers have faced is, well, beyond just being stuck in their ways. A real, like, legitimate problem that they have is there aren't a lot of people in Japan who know how to program rollback netcode. There are not... It requires a few things. Number 1, the game has to be built from the beginning with it in mind, because it's literally like the way that the game renders frames. And then you need... It's a very specific architecture for netcode for your online, and you can mess it up. Street Fighter V messed it up. They've made some improvements, but it is nowhere near as good as Western games that came out years before, literally years before. So they have this problem in Japan where it's like, well, like, we don't have anyone on call who can program rollback. It's very tricky. It's like GGPO is open source, or it is open license, but it's not like that simple. It provides your framework, but you need to know how to work within that framework. Hope I'm making sense. So ArcSys made the very smart investment of, we're going to develop our own, we're going to get people who know how to do rollback. We're going to train them. We're going to make the investment up front in the hopes that it's going to pay off. And it did. It paid off really well. Now if they could hire someone who could make a good lobby. So I'm sure that Aiding was facing the exact same problem of, like, they haven't made a fighting game since 2000. Is Kamen Rider Climax a fighting game? I've never heard of this. I guess it is. 2017. I'm sure that it has delay-based netcode and it has shitty online. It's like a weird arena fighter from the looks of it. They are probably like, shit, like, what ArcSys basically did is they made it socially unacceptable to release a fighting game without rollback. Because they made the first move by putting it in Strive, they made it so that now everyone needs to have it, or else, because, like, well, fucking ArcSys did it, right? Like, practically an indie company, like a AA company did it. And, Capcom can't do it? Like, come on, right? It just, it looks bad. So, like, now, I'm very curious how the deal went. I'm assuming that Neopol, right? That's the current publisher. Neopol probably said, we want a fighting game. So they looked around and they looked at 8ing and they were like, hey, you guys have made some licensed fighters before. To make one for us. And 8ing said, okay, but we're going to need a fighting game like publisher. Or can we collaborate with ArcSys? Or something like that. I don't know how I'd be very curious to know how it went down. And then ArcSys said, yeah. I'm assuming this is what happened, is that ArcSys agreed, and they said that they probably cut some sort of deal that was ArcSys is going to lend some technical support. So they're going to lend some of their netcode programmers, because they don't have... ArcSys is not going to be developing a fighting game for a little while, at least a year or two, right? So they're like, yeah, we can lend you our netcode engineers because we're not going to need them for a little bit. And you can have the guys from our animation team, or some of them at least, so that you can, like, give you guys some, teach you guys how to do our style, if that's what you guys want to use. Our visual style. So I'm assuming that's what happened. What the heck was I talking about in addition to this? Right, so it's going to have rollback. Great. Fantastic. Number 2, it has a very interesting... So mechanically, I want to talk about this game. Because, mind you, I haven't played it because the beta was only on consoles. But mechanically, this game is really fascinating to me for a couple reasons. Because they've made certain moves towards accessibility that I find curious. For starters, so during all of the character teasers, they never showed off even like what the UI looked like. And we could only really like guess just from the look of attacks, like, okay, it looks like it's using like light, medium, heavy, because a lot of the combos look like they're like 3 hits into what looks like a special move. So just, you know, just an assumption. So like, we don't know anything about the way that the game works. All of a sudden, they start dropping mechanics trailers, short little mechanic overviews. So the way that it works is that it's technically a 4/5 button fighter, sort of. You have 2 normal buttons, so basically light and heavy. And light, heavy, and then skill or special. I'm not sure exactly what they're calling it yet. I could actually probably look up the someone made some move lists. There's like some move lists. Can't I find it? DNF Duel. I want to find out like the exact terminology that they used, if it's even special moves. So they are calling them special moves, but the button is called skill, so it's a little confusing. So skill sort of acts like your heavy button, despite the fact that you also have another heavy button. So you can think of it as, I don't know, maybe like light, medium, and then skill is your heavy. That's at least how I was sort of like, I think Maximilian Dude described it that way. So I lost my train of thought. So the skills are performed, so light, heavy, and then skill, and the skills essentially work like Smash Brothers style special moves. So every single character has like neutral S, so like you just press it. They have down, forward, back, and something in the air. That's pretty much the template for everyone. And then after that, you have MP moves. So the MP skill button. I don't know what they're going to call it. I'm curious as to what the terminology is going to be for this game. So the way that MP moves work is that they are special moves that drain your mana. So skills, I feel like it's easier to call them skills and then specials. So skills don't drain, you can just use them. MP moves are specials that drain a resource called mana. So every character has a mana bar, and it essentially works sort of like your super meter, but it's a pretty interesting take on a super meter that is, from what I've seen, when I've read from people online, a lot closer to the way that DFO like skills work. Like it's an adaptation of the way that it works. So the idea is that you have a mana bar that you can spend on these special moves, and the special moves have a similar system of you can just hit the button on its own and it'll do a move. You can do like down, interesting, down, forward, backward, that type of thing. Everyone's got, their own. But you can also do traditional inputs. So you can, I'm just looking at the one for Berserker. So he's got like Frenzy is his neutral MP skill. And then you can do like a follow-up by hitting the button again. He's got down. He's got variations on like down plus MP, forward MP, back MP, and then he has one in the air. So for all of those that have inputs, like directions, you can also do a traditional special input. So like his down mana skill is Raging Fury. So you can do that with down plus MS, or you can do a DP motion, a Shoryuken motion. Same thing, like you can do forward, or you could forward plus the button, or quarter circle forward plus the button. And I have to admit that I do not know I found that very curious. I found it really interesting because it reminds me a lot of BlazBlue. And the reason that I find it interesting is because I actually don't know exactly how it works. So here's the problem, or the challenge that's created by having something like simple inputs. Simple inputs and, I guess, regular inputs, like full motion inputs for specials and all that. Traditional inputs, you could call them. The challenge is that it's basically the rule of dominant strategy, which should be a pretty intuitive thing. It's basically, if the player is presented with an option that is clearly better and more optimal and better in every way, and does what they need to do, they will use that option every time, no matter how many other options you give them. You can make every other option super, like, okay, say like you're playing a game and, pardon me, you're playing a game and you have this obstacle, right? You have this obstacle. You need to get over a wall. You need to get on the other side of this wall. This big wall, right? Like the one from Attack on Titan or something. And they say, hey, actually Attack on Titan's a good example. Because now you're given, hey, you need to get to the other side of this wall. You have two options to do that. You can use this, what's it called? The 3D movement gear or whatever? Basically like the cool grapple hook stuff. And you can use that to scale the wall and shoot from like point to point to like fling yourself with the momentum over. Super fun. Or you could just use like a nuke and blow up the wall and just walk through it. At no downside, for free. And you have a choice of either. You are always going to pick the nuke in that option, right? Maybe once or twice you'll go for the grapple hook, but it'll always be disappointing because the nuke is so much more effective. So when you have a system like easy and full inputs, or traditional inputs in fighting games, you have to account for that, right? So BlazBlue has this built into its system. So BlazBlue Fantasy Versus, if no one played it or was familiar with it, BlazBlue, the way it's based off of actually a really popular mobile gacha game. I knew a guy in high school who was really into BlazBlue, actually the mobile game, and he kind of described it to me. So it's like an RPG system, sort of, like of combat. So the way that BlazBlue Fantasy Versus worked is that every character, all of their special moves are represented as little like skill icons under their health bar. And when you use the move, it goes on a cooldown. However, if you do the easy version of the move, so here's the catch. If you do the easy version of the move by just hitting like a button plus, or a direction plus special, it'll go on cooldown for like a few seconds, like 5 seconds or something. If you do the full input, then the cooldown is almost instant. It's practically instant. Like by the time the move is finished, it's off cooldown essentially. So the way that kind of ended up shaking out is that at a high level, and this is sort of like, auto combos in Dragon Ball FighterZ. I think around the time that Melty Blood type Lumina came out, I mentioned the same sort of thing. These sort of like easier systems, or easy input versions of systems in fighting games. The way that they end up working at intermediate and high levels is that you end up using both. So, if you're playing BlazBlue and you have a big reversal move, a big like uppercut move with invincibility that's going to slash your opponent out of the air. And you can do the easy like press up plus special, or you can do the forward, down, down, forward motion, right? Plus a button. You can choose, you can make the decision which one you want to do, depending by your like reaction time. Sometimes you just know instinctively that you will not be able to do that input fast enough to anti-air someone, so you just do the easy version. Sometimes there's combos that can be made slightly easier if you can work in the easy version of the special or something like that, right? Maybe you have a move that's a really good punish move, but you know that you can't hit it fast enough. You do the easy version, right? Because it's so tight, you gotta win the round now, you gotta get that damage in now, or something like that. So you do the easy version. And in other situations, you'll do the full version. And typically, because the way that it at least worked in BlazBlue was that the easy and full versions had different properties sometimes. So yeah, there was a difference in some of their utility, right? I do not know if DNF Duel is using the same type of trade-off system, but I think it will. The thing that would make the most sense to me would just be if you do the full version of the input, it consumes less mana. So I don't know about that for certain. I want to go watch some more videos of it and people playing it just to see if I catch, like, the problem is there's no training mode in the beta, so you can't really experiment with that sort of stuff, but I believe that they are. It would be very strange to me if they didn't, because the game, this kind of leads into the other mechanics of the game has some really interesting stuff going on. So I mentioned mana. So you essentially have a mana bar underneath your health bar. And mana starts at 100, and it can go up to the cap for mana goes up to a maximum of 200. So you start with a max of 100, it can go up to 200, and it goes up, the cap raises the more damage you take. So the lower your health is, the more mana you have. And that's important because something I neglected to mention was that MP moves can be canceled into each other. So the more mana you have, the more combo extensions you can do. The longer your combos can be. So it's kind of like this sort of inherent like seesaw mechanic, right? Like you deal more damage to your opponent, and of course you gain the health lead, but you are giving them the opportunity to come back with a larger combo, right? And what I like about that, at least in theory, is that it's a comeback mechanic that's actually reliant on like skill and practice. Like someone who does not know the game or hasn't put any practice or time into it is not going to be able to take full advantage of having like 200 mana. They're not going to be able to do that. So it also means that like even when someone's health is low, they almost become more dangerous. So the tension persists throughout the round. The other thing that I think is really neat is ways that mana. So they released this video about how the MP gauge works. So basically it refills over time. That's one way that it'll work. If you don't spend it for a few seconds, it'll start refilling. The other way is, I think, just landing attacks that don't consume mana. So any non-MP attacks will refill it a little bit. And the third method is it's a mechanic called conversion. So I should get into this. I should mention this quickly. So there's two types of damage you can take in DNF Duel. Red damage, which is health that is just gone, and white damage. So white damage is there's a little bit of like white left on your health bar. If you've played like a versus game like Marvel vs. Capcom, it's really similar to like weirdly enough, when you have that little like when you take damage, but you have that like bit of red left on your health bar, and if you tag that character out while they're in the back, it'll like slowly regenerate to where that it'll gain back the red health. White health essentially works the same way, where your white health will regenerate over time after not taking damage. Not sure if it doesn't do it on block or something like that. That's a little minute. And it seems like most attacks do some combination of red and white damage. So conversion is a mechanic wherein you sacrifice your white health, all of it, to gain is it an equivalent amount of mana? Basically, you sacrifice your white health to gain mana, to refill that bar. It had the whole. I was just looking at it. I remembered. I can't remember if it's. I feel like it's like a little less. You get like a little less MP back than you spent it on, or something like that. But that's the basic idea. That is a really interesting trade-off, and apparently it's lifted, according to a comment, it's lifted right from Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, which was developed by A-Ting. So, there you go. Right, so the whole idea of sacrificing health, okay, I should mention this. I'm not done with conversion. Conversion's a crazy mechanic. So conversion, you sacrifice you sacrifice all of your white health. So you give up all that health that you could have regenerated back. You sacrifice the health to gain mana, and you can also do conversion as essentially a Roman cancel. So you can use it after a bunch of different moves to cancel them immediately, which means that you get even crazier combo extensions. So you get more mana back to do your MP moves that can combo into other MP moves or cancel into other MP moves, and then you can use conversion to reset, basically. I don't know. There's going to be some wild stuff in this game. It looks really neat, and the damage doesn't look like super high so far. It looks fairly reasonable. The gameplay looks really cool. I am a big fan of the way that this game looks. There is no air dashing, which is kind of interesting. It's very rare for a very anime fighter to not have air dashing. I'm trying to think. The closest thing would probably be like, Marvel vs. Capcom, where there's no air dashing, but that's also like not really. It's not really an anime game. It's a versus tag game. It's different. So this is. I forgot to mention. So. I was going to talk about movement options. So the movement does look like deliberate, right? It looks like the way that someone described DFO is that there's a lot of classes that, for instance, cannot block damage. So you will just take damage if your positioning is bad. So I think that the way that they're emulating that is movement is very committal in this game, from the looks of it. So like, if you whiff a move, you can get a huge punish off of that. There's not a ton of like big attacks that are safe. So it looks like it has kind of a interesting neutral. Like, attacks are fast, but you're sort of almost encouraged to play a very methodical neutral game because of how hard punishes can be. And I'm really curious to get my hands on it. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it for that reason. What was I talking about? Right. So Another thing, and this is what a lot of people are upset about, is the inclusion of a block button. I want to talk about movement options because one of the movement options is a roll. So the way that you perform the roll is you hold block and then just a direction. It's pretty simple. I think rolls are like mostly invincible or something like that. They look like they work like KOF rolls. People really dislike the inclusion of a block button, and this gets me into some other topics that this was spurring in my brain. So the inclusion of a block button is tricky because the only other series that really does it is Mortal Kombat. And so you have to, so you might be asking, what do you lose? What is the difference between a fighting game with and without a block button? And the answer is honestly pretty simple. You lose cross-ups, essentially. So a cross-up is just like, if you imagine a regular or a traditional 2D fighter, or most fighters in general, you block by holding back, which means that, and back is relative to your opponent, which means that your opponent can jump over you, for instance, and do an attack that has a very like sweeping hitbox that maybe like hits behind them as they're jumping, and they can actually cross you up, so they'll pass the halfway point of your character, switch what direction is technically forward and backward, and now you're holding the wrong direction. You're actually holding forward, and you get hit by that big sweeping move while they're in the air, and that is called a cross-up. It's pretty simple idea, I feel like, if once you understand the idea of blocking. And there's a lot of moves that are like, well, you'll see that they're specifically like, oh, this is a good cross-up move, something like that. A block button basically removes that, the possibility of that, because, well, you can just hold a button. You can hold a button that is not affected by where your opponent is in relation to you on the screen. Pardon me. Some people... Okay, so here's what's weird. Some fighting game players are the most sensitive people ever. They saw simple inputs. So I've seen comments that are like, "This game was a block button? Guess you just lost. You just lost a sale, legitimately." I was like, what? Like, there's people like who, it's so weird to me. There's people out here who really consider cross-ups to, for some reason, they consider cross-ups to be the like pinnacle of quality in fighting games. Like, if a fighting game has cross-ups, it's a real fighting game, or it's good. They need cross-ups, which is weird because cross-ups have never been like a super integral thing. Like, they've been in a lot of games just because of the way that blocking works, but there's never like a cross-up focused fighter, the same way that, you know, you look at Guilty Gear, and classic Guilty Gear style is like, it's very knockdown, set play focused, where a lot of your combos end up going into a hard knockdown, and then you cycle pressure as your opponent is trying to get up. It's called okizeme. You would call classic Guilty Gear like an okizeme focused fighter, because that's just what a lot of the gameplay revolves around. That's where a lot of the damage happens. The only difference example I can think of is later on in Street Fighter 4. I wasn't playing fighting games when SF4 was really a thing, or when it was popular, but from what I've heard, a lot of the later strategies in Street Fighter 4 ended up being like knockdown into an ambiguous overhead, which is basically just when you jump and you make your opponent guess whether or not you're going to do which side your attack is going to land on. You do like you do the same thing that you would do if it was a cross up, but you have to make your opponent guess whether you're going to actually cross them up or if you're going to land in front, or if you're going to maybe just do like a no attack and then land and then do a low or a grab or something like that. And even then, that's almost more of like an Okizeme set play type thing. Like the game had a very ingrained form of set play. Cross-ups are not like the most integral thing to a game, and it's so weird to see people act like they are, and it kind of like there's definitely a streak of elitism among certain fighting game players about the genre, and it just manifests in weird, like, irrational ways like this. Like, really? You're not gonna buy it because it has a block button? Like, I get that, like honestly, I like having directional blocking. I would prefer not to have a block button, just because I personally like the level of depth that things like cross-ups provide. I like that personally. It also lets you have things like charge characters, which is just a neat kind of flavor of character. Because charge characters are literally all about holding down and back to do their moves. So I don't see the reason for that. I don't see the reason for that reaction besides just like, oh, it's different. It's this thing that a lot of people do, which I think more people need to like self-police, because I think it's really bad, is they have an emotional reaction to something, usually because something's like different, and then they basically work backwards to rationalize that emotional reaction. You see, like, people have this a lot with like what we're talking about right now is a very benign example of something that affects a lot of things, that pops up a lot. So, like, for instance, this happens with, like, honestly, I think it happens a lot with, like, gay people or anything, like, a lot of LGBT-focused stuff. I think a lot of people, because a lot of the media they end up consuming is very, like, doesn't include that, or very little of it. They're used to just seeing stuff that is not LGBT, right? And then they see it, and they think it's weird, and they can't identify with it. And instead of saying, okay, well, it's just weird, and just kind of moving on because it's really not that big of a deal, they have this emotional reaction of, like, because they've never been able to they've never had this thing happen where they don't identify with something in this kind of a way. They're not used to it. They're not used to being not used to this, if that makes sense. Can I rephrase that better? I feel like that was a good idea. They're not used to being unfamiliar with something in this way. I don't know if there's a better way I can say it. There's like two layers going on here of unfamiliarity. And so instead of just moving on and not really caring about it, and just saying, okay, well, maybe it's just not made for me, or is it even that important? Is this even a bad thing? They have an emotional reaction because they get, like, confused, and they're little bitches, and they say, this is different, it's bad. Why is it bad? They're shoving it down my throat. You're shoving it down my throat, which is the most nonsensical argument in almost any, like... Nothing in media is really shoved down your throat. Like, there's no physical act happening. No one's forcing you to watch or engage with anything. The amazing thing about current media is that you can even choose to disengage with it if you really don't like it that much. Like, why don't you like it? This is a different conversation. All I'm saying is people see things that they're not familiar with, and then they have these emotional reactions of confusion, and they don't really examine that at all, and they just start working on this level of like, I need to justify why I feel weird, and it can't be my fault. It can't be my fault. It can't be that I'm being a little baby about it. It has to be something wrong. I must reflect these feelings outward. And sometimes that results in just being really obnoxious in a comments section. So I think like this exact same reaction happens when you don't have a block button. Like, it's really not that big of a deal, guys. Like, you don't even know that much about the game or other ways that it could be deep, and you're already dismissing it. The same thing happened, pardon me, when the easy inputs were revealed, essentially. And people said, oh, this is a baby game. It doesn't have motion inputs, or it does, but it's optional. First of all, you don't know if there's if it works like BlazBlue, where there's a difference or an incentive to use the full motion. So you're just jumping the gun. Second of all, why are we suddenly acting like motion inputs are the embodiment of mechanical difficulty in fighting games? Like, when did this happen? when did, like, you meet people who don't know how to play fighting games and they're like, oh, it's so hard to do a quarter circle. Like, they find it difficult to do a quarter circle. But you, Mr. fucking fighting game vet, FGC boomer over here, this is what you consider to be the true difficulty of the game? Of the genre? Like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, do you think it's like a barrier? Okay. So like, I can see the argument maybe that, oh, motion inputs are a necessary execution barrier. That is certainly an argument. But also, I think that there's room in the genre for a game that does things a little bit differently. I think it's fine for fighting games to expand a little bit outside of the scope of things that are of challenges or barriers that are common, right? And maybe focus on something else. Just because a game is maybe simpler in one way means that it might very well be complex in another. Like, that's my assumption, honestly. Like, I usually look at things in that kind of a, like, okay, there's obviously a trade-off. Like, I don't think it's just a baby game because it's lacking this one thing. Let me see where they might have poured, like, when I used to play League of Legends, especially in the earlier, now they're the earlier days, I used to be like, so, when I started playing around like 2014, I was like, oh, so recent. I was such a recent, player, and now 2014 is like the first half of the game's life, which is crazy. But in that time period, there was a ton of comparisons to Dota, and people from Dota saying, oh, this is a baby game. It doesn't have a day-night cycle. It doesn't have high-low terrain. What else? Oh, you can just recall for free? This is such a baby game. There's no, what's another one? Oh, there's no denying. You can't deny minions. You can't body block minions to build up the wave when they're going up the lane. All these things that they're like, this makes League a baby game. And it's like, I've played both. Somewhat extensively. Definitely more extensively in League. Jesus Christ. What League did was essentially it took the macro play, the skill or the skill of macro play, and it kind of like a liposuction, not a liposuction. What am I thinking? What's surgery? Like when you get like a enlargement surgery for your rear, like when you get like a butt enlargement, what they do is they take fat from like part of your body and they just pump it into your ass. League basically did that with the macro and micro game. So macro game is like large team-wide, map-wide things like big team play things like rotations, going between objectives, where you're going here and there, playing team fights, engaging team fights, all that. Micro play is like the smaller, like 1v1, 2v2 type of interactions, where things like movement, spacing, aim, is more of a role. And League essentially took the macro. They took where the skill was apportioned, and they took some of it from the macro and they put it into the micro. So for instance, like League of Legends has, I think they basically systemically worked out every single point and click ability over the course of the game. I think currently there's like almost no, very, very few actual point and click spells in League of Legends. Most of them are skill shots. Most of them are abilities you have to aim. And that's because League is a game that's more focused on like, moment-to-moment micro interactions between you and your opponent. And that's what a lot of people find more satisfying about it, is that it feels less team-dependent. I still think League is honestly too team-dependent, but it is less so than Dota. So they just, if you actually look at the whole of the game and you look at the ways in which it's different and things that it does differently, you'll see that, like, yes, it's less deep in this sense, but it makes up for it in other ways. It is a different game with its own identity. If it was just Dota, why even bother making a game, right? Dota's still there. If it was well, technically League came first, but, comparing it to, like, the original Dota, why would you even bother making a MOBA if it's just going to be the exact same type of gameplay as the same types of, skill challenges as Dota? Same thing with, like, fighting games. I think we're seeing the same thing here, where, like, this isn't even that crazy, It's like a block button, easy versions of inputs for special moves. It's not that crazy. It's doing its own thing, and I think that a lot of, like, okay, so here's a great example. The perfect counter example to the idea that easy inputs make something a baby game is Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. So if you don't know Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, basically it's Marvel vs. Capcom, except with Power Rangers characters. Came out a couple years ago, and it is surprisingly really, really good. It's got rollback, it's got a really good cast, the gameplay is crazy, and that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make, is that Power Rangers uses like light, medium, heavy, and then a special button, and then specials are performed with just a direction, like Smash Brothers. Direction plus special. And the game is not easy. Like, the combos are hard. I'm not especially good at practicing combos, mind you, but I was having a lot of difficulty wrapping my mind around, like, just how long and timing intensive they are, and how tight some of the timing is, just because I don't have to do a quarter circle to do a special move doesn't suddenly make it the easiest thing in the world. Like, that was not the barrier, right? The purpose of special motions is a few things. I think I've mentioned this before, but a few things. Number one is that it lets you give characters more moves, because you aren't limited to just 4 directions plus maybe like neutral or something. You can have a character with 12 moves or something by just having a bunch of different motions, right? But also, like, it provides very specific balancing, I guess, to moves. So, like, the classic example is Ryu's Dragon Punch, So it's Dragon Punch is the rising invincible uppercut. It's a huge, big-ass classic reversal move. Do it on your wake up. Maybe don't do it on your wake up. Your opponent's just gonna block it, and you're gonna get punished. That's part of the thing. So Dragon Punch is done by hitting forward, down, and then down forward. So it's basically you do a quarter circle, but you tap forward at the beginning. One of the most important things about that move and that motion in particular is that at no point can you hold back to block. So yes, it is a reversal move and it is invincible if you get it off, but doing it puts you at an inherent risk just by requiring you to hit forward, right? Like, there's moves that you can do much more easily out of block because they require, like, doing a quarter circle back or something. Or a reverse DP where you're hitting like back, down, back, right? Those are moves that like you can do out of block much more easily, whereas a DP requires you to look for like a gap in your opponent's string or something like that where you can do that move, where you can fit that in without just getting hit. There is an inherent balance. Things like half circle motions, those are intended. Like, if you get good at them, if you practice them, you can do them pretty quickly, but no matter what, it's always going to be slower than even like a quarter circle or just a directional plus a button. Half circles are always going to be slower. That's just an inherent part of the game, right? And you have to design, when you give a move a half circle motion, what you're basically saying to the player is, this move is notably strong. If this move was on an easier input, it might be too powerful, right? Because it would be too easy to do. Like, take Potemkin's, the Potemkin Buster, this gigantic damage grabbing move, and it's done doing the same input you do for supers, even though it's just a special. That doesn't, cost any meter or anything. And it's a half circle back, forward, plus punch for a special move. And what's that saying to the player is, this is a crazy-ass... This is a very heavy move in the character's arsenal, right? A lot of weight's being put on this one move. And if you don't have... So special motions have motion inputs. Let me restart. Motion inputs have a place in fighting games. They have a place, but they have to be designed around and they have to be accounted for. And if you aren't going to use them, you need to make up for it in some way. So you can't have, for instance, if Potemkin Buster was one button or, a direction plus a button, it would be freaking ridiculous. It would be insane. That's another thing about Potemkin Buster is like that move, it's a half circle back, which means you have to start at the forward position. So you can't be blocking. Another example. Like, you have to plan around the fact that the moves are just inherently easier to do. You have to account for that, and that means that in some ways you just aren't going to be able to do certain things. Like, you can't do a huge reversal super on a one button move, right? Why did I even get on this tangent? Right. DNF, because DNF Duel... Yeah, the game will be deep. I can assure you, or at least I'm very confident, that the game will be deep in ways that are not necessarily just motion. Like, this doesn't even matter. This is so minute. One thing I find interesting is that, so the way that supers work in this game, speaking of one-button supers, is that this game looks like it has one-button supers. So when you drop to 30% health, that is the amount where you have, that is the most amount of mana that you can have. So the mana raises up to 200, and you hit 200 when you get down to 30% health. When you hit 30%, you go into Awakening, and the UI is designed very nicely so that the last 30% of your health bar is like, it kind of like wings off, like the bar like gets bigger towards the end to show that it's, or to delineate where the cutoff is for awakening, and it'll start flashing red. So once you go into awakening from, I believe, I don't know if this game has any kind of like, oh, you get more damage or something like that. I don't think they do, because they already have the mana mechanic, the mana cap increasing. But you do get access to, what exactly, they're called like awakening? Yeah, just awakening skills, which are your supers, which look like they're just done with a single button. So I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know how the this is going, the awakening skills are going to work, or super moves are going to work. That's something that I have yet to make a call on. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea. Mind you, all of these things can be done well or done poorly. You can put a move that's as strong as like Ryu's classic Dragon Punch on a move that's super easy to do. And there are consequences to that in regards to the game's balance. So that's something that I'm curious about. I'm getting very close to 2 hours, so I think I'm probably going to what the fuck? What is this? Someone literally just left a comment. That's so weird. Someone literally just left a comment on episode 22 about wanting to be on the podcast. So sorry, but sorry. You I hope I answered your question. Sorry about that. Damn, it feels bad to turn people down, but I don't know. I have to stay by what I've decided. Oh, also, Lozy, I'm just gonna point out, in the comments you left last episode, you referred to Jin as Jim, which I find really funny. Jim Kusanagi. The third generation immigrant. That's really funny. Do people get that? I don't know. Like, you know how, like, you can always tell, like, when you look at immigrant families, you can tell who's the third generation. Because, like, obviously the people who first come over, they're going to have, like, very native names to their home country. And then their children probably do as well. But then their children who have, like, grown up in America, they want to name their kids something more American. So they'll pick, like, you'll just end up with, like, a freaking, I don't know, like George Takei. George Takei. That's a good example. George Takei. Is he third generation? I'm putting my money down on it. George Takei, if you're watching this, confirm in the comments yes or no. Speaking of, yeah, I hope this was a good episode. I feel like I just ended up, I ramble every episode. My voice is getting tired. I'm getting a little hungry. I did eat before, so I've been burping this whole time. Thank you for watching if you've made it to the end. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I will definitely get to them. It has to be a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. Yeah, subscribe. I'm also, oh yeah, so if anyone's curious about my upload schedule, I'm thinking of maybe trying out doing like a video every 2 weeks as opposed to every week. And the reason for that is I feel like I do better when I when I upload less often, which is, Jesus, did it really happen again? Pardon me. I feel like my channel does better when I don't upload, which is really weird. So I want to sort of do an experiment. I'm going to try out 2 uploads a month for a bit. The good news is that Next video is going to be on Saturday, which is Christmas. It's going to be a special Christmas-themed episode. So that'll be fun. That'll be cute. And, yeah, so if anyone's curious, that's why there's been a bit of a gap. I'm curious, actually. I'll ask you guys a question specifically. Do you guys notice what my upload schedule is? Like, to me, it's very obvious, right? When I go a week or two without uploading, I feel it because the horrifying truth is that I am myself all the time. I'm in my body and I'm living my life. I know that's hard for some people to like grapple with because it's a very disturbing fact, but it's an unfortunate truth of reality. So to me, when I go a while without uploading, it's like, fuck, I feel it. Like, I know what it is, 'cause I'm experiencing every excruciating second. But, like, do other people notice it? Like, does it matter? How do you feel about it? Because I feel bad when I don't upload, because I feel like I'm lazy. Even if I'm working on something, which I'm usually not because I'm a horrible procrastinator. Literally, here's a little behind the magic. Like, most of my videos are made in like 4 days. I can only think of 1 or 2 videos that took more than 4 days to make. 4 or 5 days. That's the God's honest truth. I don't know if that makes my content look better or worse, but yeah, that's just what it is. And it kind of ends up leading to most of my... I always feel like I'm just throwing shit together when I make a video, but I don't know. I look back and I like some of them. I'm gonna stop rambling and I'm gonna go make a little snack. A little snack. And yeah. Goodbye.